The May 13th Community Center Advisory Committee to order at 4:30 p.m. And Gordon, would you like to do the honors with the roll call, please? If you got it up on your
If I,
iPad?
sure.
Otherwise,
Yes, I can. I'm certainly be happy to.
Great, thank you.
Rick DeGolia. Here. Okay. Steve Dostart. Here. Dee Fisher.
She's excused.
Okay. Rose Howe.
Here.
Phil Lively. Here. Clyde Meridew.
Here.
Paul Tonelli.
Excused.
Jim Dobby.
Excused.
And Elizabeth Lewis.
Present. And I was hoping that Councilmember Dobby would have notified his alternate of him not being here. And I know Mr. Widmer is in town, so he may show up. Thank you all for coming, 4:30 on time and being on time. We also have members of our staff with us today. We have Gordon Siebert and Chief Flint and Tom Gordon of the library. So now is the time for public comments, which are only for items not on the agenda. We have no members of the public present unless our videographer would like to make a comment. Okay, we'll close public comments and we'll go to the regular agenda. If looking at the order of the agenda, it seemed to me that maybe we should reverse items 3 and 4 and let the ad hoc committee members give their reports before we take action on the Civic Center Master Plan, if that's acceptable to everyone. Okay. So we'll call for ad hoc committee reports, and can we have a member of the Master Plan ad hoc committee please give a report?
Okay. It's Clive and I are the two that are here, and then Paul and Dee Dee the other two.
Okay.
So we talked about, Gordon did a beautiful job of writing this up. Thank you, Gordon.
The staff report?
Yes, and we went through the rankings. It was very clear who the top 3 were. They were HMC plus BPA had the highest vote, HKS had the second highest vote, and BMS had the 3rd highest vote. LPA and HED were a step below. There was a clear separation in this. So we were going to, since it was clear and it was consistent across the ballots that those 3 were the top. We did not see the names of the people, but we saw the scores, and that was consistent across all 9 people. So we were going to recommend that, there's Paul right there, that we proceed to recommend those 3 to council. We felt that all 5 of the firms were very highly qualified, that so there weren't any firms in there that we were worried about. We just thought those 3 were the top 3, and that they would all do a good job. We have various questions about each firm, which we have detailed we put into a master question list in a way that could be as generic as possible, so we could ask all the firms the same question and be consistent. So the first step was we wanted to recommend a process to go to council with, which is we would prepare this staff report. Step 2 would be to go through, they gave us reference names in the proposal, so that to work together here today to come up with a process to do the reference check. We were proposing that like-kind people would call like-kind people like we did on Town Center Task Force. So Gordon would call public engineers or the public works director, and George would call the city managers. We talked about perhaps council members with council members, but Gordon just told me that might be a problem. So the task force members who are not council members may be the ones calling the council members. But with the thought that we'd be as consistent as possible, that so 1 or 2 people are calling all across the firms. So you're not just calling on 1 firm, you're going to call on 3. You might call 1 person on 3 firms, another person might call 1 person for 3 firms.
Yeah.
So you get a feel across the references. And then to go ahead now immediately, and this is something we didn't do well last time in the Town Center Task Force, immediately notify the 3 firms that we want to interview, set those scheduling, because it's going to have to happen very, very quickly.
Mhm.
So maybe as soon as tomorrow, George and his staff, or Gordon, whoever would reach out to them
Mhm.
and secure dates, and we would pre-clear those in this meeting now.
Okay.
So the references don't need to have clear dates, but because people will do those on their own time, but the interviews will wait.
Sure.
And then the last step would be to, after those reference checks and interviews, and we thought the interviews would be all of us, anyone who can attend,
Mhm.
would come to the interviews of the firms, ideally after the reference checks were completed, so things that came up in those reference checks could be addressed in the interviews.
Mhm.
And then after that, we would re-vote again. Same matrix, exactly the same matrix. Now we would just fill in the one that said references or whatever. And you can change your scores on the things you've already rated, because you may feel differently after you've heard them talk about their expertise.
Mhm.
Now that you've heard it, you've read it, but now you have a verbal discussion, and you may feel they're better or worse than you thought before.
Mhm.
We would rescore, and then, and at that point, either our subcommittee or another subcommittee to be named would then work with staff to have another memo that would be prepared for council as a recommendation.
Okay.
And one thing to add to that,
Mhm.
along with that recommendation, somebody on staff will be opening the bid letter
Mhm.
from the highest ranked firm. So would that happen before or after the council sees the recommendation?
After they select.
It's gotta be after.
Yeah.
That's my understanding, right?
Yes, it'd be after you've selected the top scoring firm, we would then open that and use that as the basis for negotiations.
So it's after the recommendation goes to the.
Right. Well,
After
no,
they
no,
choose a
The
firm.
council has to-
After the
council
committees.
has to choose, yeah.
Yeah, they can always choose not to proceed with that firm. They can open the bid, say we don't like it, try to negotiate, say we didn't go well, and they can elect then to go to whoever they want. They can pick another firm or whatever they want to do. They just can't compare the bids, right?
So I have a question for Gordon. Why would the council members not be calling the council members? Because in the Town Center Task Force, we did it.
Right.
It was not a problem.
My understanding is that it creates a potential conflict of interest because the council member is also a member, obviously a member of the council, making the award to the selected firm. So you're you could be influencing inappropriately and unfairly influencing the results of the selection process as part of the subcommittee, and then confirming that as a member of council.
So just for a point of reference, there's no council member on this master plan subcommittee. So
So we're clear.
we're
If-
clear on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so far.
yeah. Does any other council committee member want to make any comments about this?
Well, the one other thing we wanted to call out was a thing that came up, and you'll see it in our questions, but something that came up frequently was some of the proposals sound like they think they're getting the architecture. And we wanted to make it clear that this is for site planning, this is for master planning. And B, we would want to make sure that that doesn't preclude the firm from enter into architecture later. That sometimes I'm not great with public contracting, but sometimes I think there's some kind of an issue with that. That it wouldn't preclude somebody from then submitting to be the architect of the buildings.
Mhm.
So we saw that as we read back and read the RFP and thought about it and agreed as a subcommittee that it was our understanding that we were trying to engage a master planning firm.
Mhm.
And for example, one of the firms had said, this is the architect we'll use for the buildings, and we would just say, not considering that, no. You can talk about it if you're selected and you want to recommend them, but that's not a part of the selection process.
So since we kind of took it out of order, why don't we have Gordon, let's do Gordon's staff report. We'll go back to number 3, and then we'll come back to the library ad hoc. Is that okay?
So are we closing this discussion? I
So,
just wanted
from the ad hoc committee
Oh,
reports?
from the ad
From
hoc.
just the ad hoc committee reports.
Yeah, I just wanted, I don't know where the appropriate time is to just raise the question.
Okay. Yeah?
The three that are chosen, is that a firm 3? Is it any possibility of opening it up to, say, 4 interviews?
Well,
There wasn't, the ranking didn't suggest we should. There wasn't a close fourth.
Mhm.
There was a big gap between 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5.
Well, I think it's up to the committee. I mean, I think we originally said that we were gonna just take the top three, and I think that was for expediency, to make it, to try to whittle it down. Is there a firm that you feel strongly about?
Well, I don't feel strongly about, I felt that one firm just met all the criteria as opposed to another firm that met some of the criteria. And I'm just wondering what,
Do you mean of the 4 and 5, the one met the criteria, or of the 1, 2, and 3, one didn't make them all? 'Cause-
well, the criteria, the criteria, as you know, kind of went all over the place. It was kind of hard to, so my criteria was, have they ever done a master plan? Have they done it in their office? Have they done a civic, center project? Have they done on a lower level, have they ever done a library and a police experience? So that went down to different levels of criteria for me. And I guess one of the firms that got bumped out met a higher level of criteria than some of the firms that got in. So I'm just, it's not that, these portfolios just don't tell you everything.
It's very.
I mean, there's a lot of bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just concerned because what I liked about the firm that was precluded was it was very succinct. It listed everything they've done in the civic center, the graphics, whereas some of the other ones said, hey, plot, we did a master plan, plot, we did another master plan.
You know,
So I'm a
yeah.
little concerned.
Yeah.
I want to put that on.
So Elizabeth, here's be my thought on just brainstorming a little bit.
Sure.
Is if we feel like time is not an issue, one thing we could do is interview more of them.
One more.
The question is it 4 or
All of them?
5?
Yeah.
Or would we choose to eliminate one, just
Right,
eliminate
right,
this one?
Yeah, I mean, that was the.
And then you would interview 4 of them, say?
Yeah.
And then you would score, and then you'd come up with your hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be one way to do it, because it's a part of the matrix, that you would score the references, and we haven't had time to call them.
Right.
But that would just say, if we're okay taking that time, that would be a way to cover that issue.
And I'm not trying to add another layer of complexity, because I know this is not, easy. It's not an
Well,
easy
Rose, I
task.
appreciate your insight and perspective on this because, you deal with plans like this a lot. Not on a government level, but on, proposals on, professional level.
And I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying, this is what I saw on paper, and if anybody can put anything on paper, but as I extrapolate, some of the people didn't put things on paper that I was looking for even. But,
These
you know.
proposals are hard to put together,
Yeah,
and they're
right,
hard
right.
to disseminate, and,
Yeah,
But-
well, and then in the score, sorry, interrupt.
and I have to say that it was, there's one that's in this, that I feel is too big of a heavyweight, even though, you probably got lots, a pretty high score, but I think it's probably too big for our small.
well, a number of them seem big, and then when you focus in on their local companies, some of them are just, creating a company just for this project. And that's,
And pulling in
Right.
disciplines,
I
right?
need to find that out.
Right.
So that's.
I think it's touchy.
So, I'm just throwing that out. I mean, I'm okay with the top three. I'm just a little concerned, and I just thought I'd throw that out because,
Well, let's hear from some of the other committee members.
My feeling is, there are some, we had fairly objective criteria that we measured against, and it wasn't just the strength of the firm, that was actually a relatively small part of the scoring. So I think the time to have objected to the scoring was when we were setting up the criteria. We've already established what the criteria are, and that's what we're measuring against. And 9 people measured against that, and we had an average of everyone's 9. And to me, I guess my feeling is that the top 3 measured up with my top 3, so I probably feel better about it. But you know, it
It's
was.
not that I feel good or bad about it. I mean, I just want validation.
Yeah.
You know, I like validation. I mean, you know, if this 4th or 5th company comes in and we go, ooh, that, that's not working. I would just feel relief. I mean,
What was echoed in the subcommittee from what Rose is saying is that some of the firms have very little civic center experience, and most of the firms have never done a police station. And that was caused, there was some combination of all of that in the final 3.
Well, I think
Exactly.
one of the potential
Yeah.
reasons was that it's easy to do, I should say it's easy. It's more likely to do a library, because it's a smaller project, than an entire civic center,
Right.
including library, including police, you know. I mean, that's kind of a farm few. Not many cities in California are doing that.
Yeah, and given that, you know, we're not doing the library, we're not doing the police department, but I think that, you know, top of my list was who has done a civic center, never mind all the things below that. So that was high on my list, and, you know.
A way to get specific is say who would be one way to drive this is to be specific and say, who would you have be the 4th? And then you could open that to discussion for who feels like that would be worthwhile.
Well, I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
I thought we were looking for a community center planner, not an architect at this point. And so that's what I was looking at. You know, you can say all this, a lot of them said, we'll design this and we'll design that. What we wanted was a master plan. The location, perhaps where it's gonna be, the trees, so forth and so forth, changes in the streets, whatever we can do out there. And somebody else later on will come in and say, okay, we would like to be the architect. Some of these folks said, we'll do everything, we'll do the master plan, we'll be the architect. And to my view, that's not what we were looking for. We were looking for a planner, not an architect right now.
Agreed. And
And one of the other things we missed, one of the proposers, the only one, mentioned something about cost. He was the only one that put anything in there about cost. The rest of them skated right past it.
Yeah, yeah.
One, you're right.
Is that one of that we,
No,
no?
Well, then that we're not on the same page.
Well, actually, that's not totally true. All of them address cost. Some of them actually have a cost consultant as part of their team, but they all address cost to some degree that I saw.
Okay, so,
I don't know, you know.
I have a
yes.
question. Gordon, did these include all 9 members
Yes, it did.
totals?
Yes.
Because when I add up the numbers, maybe I'm adding wrong. Oh, this is the weighted score, so this is the average at the bottom?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Because that comes up to 600, I
Right.
understand how that works.
Yeah. Well, I would
And one
rather,
category was not in there. So
What is that?
10% or whatever it was for references was exempted.
Right.
I would like to err on the side of being really conservative and trying to do a really thorough job. And if it means taking a little bit more time and interviewing another planner, I think that is something that we should do. I think it's not, should try to cover all of our bases at this early date, rather than feel like, oh my goodness, we left something unexplored. So I know that the task force, the ad hoc committee did their job, and here we are second guessing their job first off, so.
No, I think we're second guessing it. I mean, I think that this is the next level of what we've gone forward.
Paul, do you want to say
Well, I was
something?
just gonna ask Rose, specifically what firm and specifically why
Oh,
do you
okay.
think they should be included?
Well, you know, I thought LPA, you know, should have been included, and I'll tell you why. You know, I looked at their experience, project experience, and a lot of them had project experience in like Minnesota, Michigan, and I'm going, well, who is going to be on this team? And some of these people are on the top 3, okay? So when I look at the project experience, they're all, you know, within California, there are Yuba City, Rancho Santa Maria, Mission Viejo, Watsonville. And, you know, the downside was that they're not local, as some of the other top three people are. They're not San Francisco, they're not Palo Alto, whatever. But, you know, I felt that it was a real, you know, exposure of what they've done. On top of that, the presentation of their civic center experience, it was concise. They had the master plan and they had the buildings. As some of these other people said, like I said before, plop. This is a master plan, plop. This is another master plan, plop. This is another master plan. And there's nothing to correlate, you know, what the buildings, you know, what the feel is, what the environment is, or, you know, what the context is. And this looks like a real project that happened, the fruition of a project that really, you know, perhaps they did. And again, I don't know, you know, I mean, this is all on paper, right? So those are the couple of reasons. It was very concise in the way they presented their master civic center plan experience. Maybe it wasn't the greatest, maybe it wasn't the most creative, but it was a real project. It looked like that they had done, you know, and it's not none of this, you know, something in Michigan or something. You know.
I would support Rose on that for two reasons. One, because of the things she just articulated, and two, because HKS has zero experience doing what we want, or almost none.
Mhm.
And they're a hotel company. Bob Glazier is one of the top hotel resort guys in the country.
Mhm.
He's one of the best guys in the country. at it.
Best. We'll put
But he's
that
a
on
hotel
record.
guy.
And they put that in the brochure.
Yeah.
Our specialty is resort hotels, and good for them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I love Rosewood. You know.
Right, I thought that was, LPA has an office in San Jose.
I didn't go that far.
Yeah, and I like their inclusive design approach to listening, and, you know, there were lots of things about it. Community consensus, they build a community town
Well,
consensus.
these are the, you know, I did this sort of matrix, and this is
I don't
what, you know.
I could have skewed it by not, you know, filling out my master, categories correctly, but I don't know. I'd like to include them.
You know, they have the EIR people who are also on other firms, and all of this is not cast in concrete, you know, it's rotating, they're consultants, but they have a traffic engineer, so they get it, they have a, you know, civil engineer, they get that, and they also have the cost estimator as a consultant, they get it, you know, that it's cost too. So they had a number of consultants, and that's probably gonna drive up their costs, which we're not gonna like, but, you know, we can deal with that later, but I just would like to hear them, that's all, just what they're about. And the other thing about references, I've noticed that some of the references, when they give references, consultants are referencing, not clients, oh, what?
Sorry, continue.
Oh, they're not referencing clients, but they're referencing other architects. So, you know, I want to hear from clients. I want to hear who they work for, not who they are a consultant to.
Question,
Oh, yes.
the quality of proposed work, that's 30% of the weighted scale for each particular category. LPA ranked the lowest on the quality of proposed work. What were some of the things that the committee looked for in that particular category that affected that,
In the work plan?
the quality of work?
Yeah, well, I think in the work plan, other than dropping dates onto our proposed list of activities, there was no work plan. There was no description of anything that they would do. I think that affected people's scoring.
Well, there's a work plan right here.
Yeah.
There was,
that's
and
what
there
we
was
did.
no public outreach at all.
There was
In
no,
LPA,
None.
there was,
Zero.
there was also
Yeah.
no meeting.
in the work plan,
None.
in the work plan.
There was no meeting with the town council until the very end of the project.
Okay, you're right on that, there's no public outreach. You're absolutely right.
That was the thing that killed it for me, but they weren't so far out, I mean, they could fix that. They have the experience, they could fix that, but that was kind of.
Well, maybe not. I mean, I don't,
Maybe
you know,
not.
maybe not.
The other thing that I think, where I would agree with you, Rose, is I think One of the reasons I scored them low was I felt that the quality of the people in the team seemed like they were very mid-level people. There was no experience there that I thought would help drive that project.
Mhm.
And so maybe meeting them might reveal what the quality of their staff is like.
Mhm.
But I think that's why they got those
Yeah,
scores.
you're right.
Yeah, that's valid, because I don't have that public outreach on my little sheet either. You're right. You're right.
Okay, so where are we? Phil, I think you wanted to say something about LPA.
Well, I liked them because of the cost model. Nobody else had that. And we can deal with it, there's a couple other ones in there that were selected that are, I thought, were extremely aggressive about taking their proposals to get to the council, for example, in September, one of them. I don't think that's ever going to happen. We're here we are in June, September's not that far away.
Right.
We're going to do all the outreach, I don't think that's going to happen.
So just to pick up on the point that we made earlier, because HUD, they do have a company called LSA handling that cost.
Oh, I know what I said.
So that's what they
Well, see, LSA's, they're sort of across the board. They're actually on they're on,
Elizabeth,
They're on BNS, yes, sir.
yeah.
are public comments available, open, or?
Well, we're having our discussion and on this item, and then I'll open it up for public comment.
Can I make a quick one-sentence suggestion?
Okay,
This is all public record. Do you want all this information about the architects now, you guys are talking about on public record?
well, city manager,
Public record here.
this is an open meeting, and we're holding
Yeah,
discussion.
I don't think there's any way to do it.
I think it's not personnel related. It's an open discussion. We can have anybody come in and talk
They could
about.
watch this, it's fine.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
They've given us a public proposal that is available, and we're evaluating it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think that's it. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sunlight, it's just fine.
yeah, okay. So,
So that's,
Yeah.
what we're getting around to is, we could talk ourselves into opening up for one more. We could also say there was a reason they didn't make it. We could be nervous because HKS doesn't have, they're really a hotel firm. LPA did do a civic center, but they didn't have a outreach, so it's kind of one of those, to me, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's what feels right to this group of people? Do we go with Ford? Is it make it too onerous, or is it, hey, let's do it, we're at the beginning of the
So
process,
we do
why
all
not?
five of them and say, hey.
I don't think we should do all five. That's my opinion, and it's not that I'm against HED, it's that I think we have to manage our time so that we can be as effective as possible. The only thing, and I'm not looking at this in terms of my personal opinions, I'm looking at it in terms of the assessment of the entire advisory committee for LPA to get the lowest score on the quality of the proposed work and the second lowest score on understanding the project issues, which to me were the two most important things here that we could evaluate from the subjective look we can do without actually meeting the people, raises some concerns. But I respect what Rose has to say and your assessment, so I guess I personally feel like I could go either way, and if the committee thinks that it's helpful to open it up to a fourth, I would embrace that. If you think they're kind of off the charts to the point where it's not gonna be worth our time, I would go with that.
The only reason that I would recommend a fourth is if we do the interview with HKS and it's just clear they can't handle this, we're gonna want a third.
Right. I agree with that 100%. That's been my thinking. I just never had a feel that HKS was suited for this, even though their experience and everything, they rated highly and everything. I just never got the feel that they would be suited for this project. And I know how highly they scored. So in reference to what you just said, I think a third would be
Safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Fourth.
Well, a fourth.
Yeah,
Which would turn out to be
interview
a
fourth
third.
to make sure you get three.
So Rose, would you like to make a motion to expand our selection interview process to four, and we'll get a second on that?
I'd like to make the motion to expand our search to include 4 firms.
And those
Or you could just say the fourth.
The fourth would be
The fourth would be.
LPA.
Okay. All right.
All in favor?
Do I have a second? And Phil will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just like to say one thing, just for the public record, and looking at the total scores, that LPA is not leaping ahead of HED on this, going from fifth and we're becoming the fourth. They actually score fourth in scoring overall. So it's probably appropriate that
Yes.
they're included.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So, Gordon, we got that? And I think that's good. All right. So the scheduling, we're going to have Gordon inform the consultants immediately. And we're going to have to do reference calls. Now, that list of questions, and we're going to have to put together, identify who's going to do the reference checks. Now, is that something that the ad hoc committee would like to meet and then assign to everyone, or how do you want to do that?
I think we could open that up to, we know who's gonna do the staff level ones. It's Gordon and George, and they're gonna, if there's something they need to farm out, I think we should just trust them. Like if there's a different kind of person, that you should farm it out. If there's a police chief or something that, is on the list, that should get farmed out. That could do it. If, my instinct is this is gonna be who has time to call at least 4 people, one from each firm. And I think you want 2 or 3 people to volunteer for that, and that doesn't have to be on the committee.
Okay, and then I think it's important for us to call and talk to others who may not even be on their reference list. Because I think sometimes references that are listed on the reference list are, ones that will give glowing terms and information. So if there's information that we can get from other sources. That's one of the things about talking to the electeds or people who have worked with them during their projects. Maybe they're no longer the elected, but maybe they had been on council or on the staff when the project was being done.
But I'll volunteer to be one of the people
Mm-hmm.
who's gonna call across the firms to non-staff members.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, Rick? Anybody else? Do we?
Would you be willing to be our third if we need somebody?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Okay. So, and that's gonna be the week of May 20th, like?
We're gonna call the meeting. We should start calling
right away.
today.
Yeah.
I mean, we get out tonight or tomorrow, we start,
I think it's
But our goal should be to be
now.
done by the end of the week, I
through,
think, if we could.
yeah,
And then we send it to Gordon. We can't send it to this committee. We send it to Gordon.
Yeah.
And then he will, then do we just discuss it at the next meeting, or do they disseminate it, or what happens?
well, we're going to have consultant interviews the week of May 20th, is the goal.
And how do we share this information with the rest of the committee prior to being in a session with the
So
interviews?
can Gordon be the funnel and to then put it into some,
Does that become a public record?
Whatever Gordon sends to the full committee is public record.
When you do references, is there a way politically acceptable to keep them out of the public record?
I don't use any profanity.
No, but I mean, because we're not gonna wanna say, this firm said this about that firm.
So when we did the Town Center Task Force, we did have our summary, our reference checks were in our binder.
With the name of who we talked to and everything?
Mhm,
Public record.
Oh, okay. So we should submit them knowing that, when we type these things up.
mhm.
Okay. All right. And then we'll give them to Gordon, and he will disseminate them to the committee in advance of the meeting, like any kind of discussion document like this.
Yes,
Yes.
Right?
but before the interviews.
Yeah.
Right, and
Now, when you-
hopefully,
When you do your references, just make it clear it's just the reference, and it's not your take on the firm. We respect that reference, because that's going out to the full committee, and that would be a problem.
Here's what I heard the person say,
Yes.
as opposed to here's how I interpreted it.
Correct.
Got it.
Do you think we should be telling people to talk to, if this is gonna be on public record?
I think we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder.
Oh, yeah.
what they-
Forthright they're gonna be, I think it's really that forthright.
They were okay.
It's tricky, yeah. Well, I think the questions we're asking are very, the list of questions we came up with are very clear. And they ask for factual, detailed answers.
Yeah.
So for example, when we did a reference check last time on one of the firms, we said, did you have any problems? You know, it was one of the questions we have on our current list, which is like, were there problems later? Or did they meet their cost estimate? And one of the references said, you know, they spec'd the wrong nail and it cost $16,000 and we had to pay it. We didn't like that, you know? It was a very specific question and they answered it with details. They didn't say they were a bad firm or, you know, here's what happened. Yeah. And, yeah, so.
So our objective is to wrap all of the interviews up and have a meeting with this committee with a recommation that we then present to council for the June 19th meeting.
And can you name us a subcommittee so we can meet after this meeting and divvy up the references?
The three of us.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
So that's going to be, we've got an action item for
Okay.
formation of additional ad hoc committees.
Great.
Item number 6.
The interview meetings, they're public meetings.
No, the reference calls.
Oh, I understand, but the on the list of consultant interviews, we can make 20, this committee actually meets with those who we are interviewing, the 4 firms.
Yeah,
So we have to notice
we have to notice
within
it.
72
So we need
hours.
to pick those times now.
Okay. Are you thinking about having like a 1 day, full 1 day, back to back to back, an hour interview each?
That, or I would, since it's 4, it would be maybe twice, or it'd be once or twice.